Hello, this is Eastern. We are review the common project of Belsat and TVP World with the reports and analysis from Ukraine, Belarus and Russia. I'm Alexandra Shapalina and these are the main stories. An exclusive story from the hottest spot in the world, Bakhmut, given by one of its defenders.
In my personal opinion, the city will continue to collapse. That has just flown above us. Here we can hear the sounds of war.
Patriarch Kirill has proposed a truce during Orthodox Christmas. Previously, he gave his blessing to the Russian soldiers going to war. Why has there been such a significant change in the Patriarch's rhetoric?
What we can see about the truce, it is most likely another idea from the Kremlin, which was announced through the Russian Orthodox Church.
The story of a Ukrainian hospital and its personnel that has been under occupation in Balakliia and its revival after the liberation of the city.
It was a rubbish dump when we got here after the deoccupation. Everything was ruined.
Belarusian volunteer fighters from Kastus-Kalinovsky's regiment, together with Ukrainians, are defending the city of Bakhmut, which the Russian aggressor has been unable to capture for several months. Putin's mercenaries have been fiercely attacking Bakhmut, the historical center of Donbass. However, they have not been able to advance. Recently, the Ukrainian forces have managed to push the Russians out of the eastern suburbs of Bakhmut. The enemy's attacks are being repelled, but 60% of the city has already been destroyed by the Russian army. What is the situation in the city now? We have prepared an exclusive report from Bakhmut, a global hotspot number 1.
Destroyed pharmacies, buildings and administration. Hospitals, which is the worst thing. They have destroyed just everything, made people's life impossible here.
This is Jan Melnikau, a Belarusian volunteer fighter. He has been defending Ukraine against Russian aggression since 2014. Jan is a war veteran despite his young age, and now he is Volod battalion commander of the Kastus-Kalinovsky regiment of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Jan showed us around central Bakhmut, which used to be a well-developed historical center of the region. Currently one of the hottest spots on the entire front line.
At this stage of the war, when both aviation and various missile systems are operating, such as the S-300 Iskander, Tochka-U or other ones, life in Bakhmut is dangerous.
Jan says that the city is being shelled randomly, regardless of whether it is the front line or the civilian part. Therefore, if before the war more than 70,000 people lived in Bakhmut, it is rarely possible to meet a civilian now.
Bakhmut was a city far from the front line in 2014-2015. You could live a wonderful, peaceful life here. Journalists from various TV channels had the opportunity to stay at the Bakhmut Hotel and had to drive tens of kilometers to the front line to document events there. Everything was here. Car services, car dealerships, restaurants and banks.
There is no water and no electricity anymore. Active battles have turned Bakhmut into ruins. Shelling is carried out approximately every hour. There were no exceptions during the recording of the interview.
The front is stable at the moment. Our troops are not retreating. There is an active defense with attempts in certain sectors of the front to advance and recapture their advanced positions. In my personal opinion, the city will continue to collapse. That has just flown above us. Here we can hear the sounds of war.
The active fighting continues on the outskirts. This is the Opetsnaya village in the south and the Soledar-Bakhmut highway in the east. Russia has sent their mainly Wagner PMC fighters.
90% of all the soldiers here are the so-called musicians from Wagner PMC. These are convicts, most of whom don't have combat experience, who have just changed their prison sentences for a military operation. They are used as meat, like the Soviet army used to do, just to crush with manpower.
However, even in current dangerous circumstances of continuous fighting and shelling, there are moments of positivity.
We were filming when a volunteer's car drove up. They said, "Where is your car? We will bring you some gifts." These are Ukrainians. This is Bakhmut life. Guys from Chernivtsi. Have you traveled all over Ukraine to please us? Sure. My older brother died near Bakhmut 2 months ago. That's why I'm here. That is why I've come to you. This is important to me. We will continue the fight anyway. The main thing we stand for here is a free Belarus. So without a free Ukraine, there can be no free Belarus. That's why we're here now.
Not only do the Belarusian fighters have a lifelong dream, but they are also good-hearted. On the way, they met some of the last residents of Bakhmut who haven't left the city. Jan decided to share some food with them.
There is some food for you. And put some apples in the pocket.
Thank you.
The head of the Russian Orthodox Church, Patriarch Kirill, has called for a ceasefire on Orthodox Christmas Eve. Why has the Russian Patriarch suddenly changed his rhetoric from urging Russians to participate in the war against sovereign Ukraine to having aspirations to bring peace?
We do not want to fight with anyone. Russia has never attacked anyone. It's amazing such a great and powerful country has never attacked anyone. It only defended its borders.
The Patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church, Kirill, also known as Vladimir Gundyayev, is close to Putin and the establishment of the Russian Federation. From the very beginning of the full-scale Russian-Ukrainian war, he has blessed the military personnel of the Russian Federation going to war against the Ukrainian people. He has skillfully manipulated public opinion by drawing parallels between the war in Ukraine and the fight against the Nazis in the Second World War.
It was Russia that saved the world from the terrible plague of fascism. Thanks to the sacrifices of Russia, victory was achieved in the first place.
After the massacre in Bucha, the destruction of Mariupol and tortures in the liberated Chernihiv and Kherson regions, the Christian world began to distance itself from Patriarch Kirill. Pope Francis, in a Zoom conversation with Kirill, asked him to switch from the language of politics to the language of Jesus, and not to sink to the level of Putin's altar boy.
There were many expectations of Patriarch Gundyayev. This is an intelligent, well-read, educated person, an eloquent speaker, with a huge circle of acquaintances. He was allowed to travel even during the years of the Soviet regime. And to be honest, church people expected very gracious, good reforms from him, liberating ones. And to the greatest amazement of everyone, the only thing Patriarch Gundyayev did was to throw himself into the arms of the state and turn what was left of the Russian church into a propaganda apparatus.
With an increase in the number of victims among the civilian population of Ukraine, as well as the destruction of Orthodox churches by the Russian troops, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the Moscow Patriarchate declared its independence from Moscow. What is more, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church has condemned the Russian war in Ukraine and expressed its disagreement with the position of Kirill. But Patriarch Gundyayev continued to advocate for war actions.
Today is a fateful moment because many are rebelling against Russia, and many are desperate to destroy Russia, its identity, its independence, its freedom. Therefore today we must especially fortify ourselves in faith, fill our churches, pray for the authorities and for the soldiers, for relatives and friends.
Because of his rhetoric, Kirill has been put on the sanctions list by Great Britain and Canada. Lithuania has banned him from entering its territory for 5 years. The Ukrainian Holy Synod has turned to Patriarch Bartholomew of Constantinople with a request to dethrone Gundyayev and declare his concept of the Russian war a heresy.
Faith and love for the fatherland are the foothold for people living in the Russian world.
For an ordinary Orthodox believer, Kirill might seem as an impressive figure with great importance in the system of Russian power. But this is not so, says religious scholar Vadim Rosenfeld.
What we can see about the truce, it is most likely another idea from the Kremlin, which was announced through the Russian Orthodox Church. It is no secret to anyone that today the Kremlin needs peace. They need some kind of opportunity to get out of this terrible situation with the remnants of honor, but they don't see a way out. Well, the Russian Orthodox Church came up with a reason for a temporary peace, the Christmas truce. I think this is another trick by the Kremlin. I do not believe that this is an independent act of Gundyayev.
Nevertheless, on Friday, Putin personally instructed Shoigu to stop any military operations in Ukraine from 12 o'clock on January the 6th to midnight on January the 7th. The chain of events, Kirill's proposal and Putin's order just a few hours later, it raises doubts that it was just a sheer coincidence.
During the occupation of the Ukrainian town Balakliia, the Russian soldiers settled in the medical facility and turned it into a military hospital. Doctors and patients had to leave the building. The multi-purpose hospital, which received patients from all over Ukraine, was looted and destroyed during the occupation. After the liberation of the city, the rebuilding works began, but it is no longer possible to receive patients without the necessary equipment. How were the doctors held hostage, and how are they rebuilding their hospital? You will find out in our next story.
The equipment that used to be here is still missing. There was patient monitoring equipment on these racks. We have received these new devices, which were also missing because everything was looted and destroyed. It was a rubbish dump when we got here after the deoccupation. Everything was ruined.
Sergei Goptsi has been working as the head of the intensive care unit at Balakliia Clinical Hospital for 30 years. He is showing the ward where everything is now in place to receive patients. And this is what the hospital looked like from March to September during the occupation. In the early days of the war, the Russian military set up a hospital in one of the departments. But when the Ukrainian armed forces counterattacked, they had to evacuate their wounded soldiers. In revenge, the doctors say, the Russians began demolishing the hospital.
As far as I know, they had the launcher here, so there was a direct hit, destroying the passage slabs entirely. As well as the whole section, there was nothing left of it in the roof. We had to rebuild it bit by bit, brick by brick.
The builders went to great lengths to rebuild the destroyed hospital buildings and kept on working even under constant fire.
Despite the rocket attacks and the fact that they turned off the lights, despite the frost and the rain, the guys worked outdoors. We worked round the clock 7 days a week without interruption. Everything was done in a short time. We were tasked with opening the main buildings before the new year.
Doctors recall that on the 2nd of April 2022, a tank drove up to the hospital building and opened fire. According to them, the Russian soldiers came from the self-proclaimed Luhansk and Donetsk People's Republics. On the night of April the 4th, they broke into the hospital and started a rampage. They were kicking the doors to the rooms and shooting at the walls and windows with machine guns. They lined up all the male doctors in the corridor and started beating them.
The soldiers surrounded us and decided they had to kick us out of here so they could stay here themselves. They were shooting and abusing the patients who were here. They were violent towards the doctors, beating them and pushing them down the dark corridor while racking the slides of their guns.
The staff had to leave the hospital building as the military delivered an ultimatum. They were allowed to evacuate the patients. After the deoccupation, 3 departments have been reconstructed practically from scratch, and the heating and plumbing systems have been restarted. We have finished everything in 3 months to start admitting patients as soon as possible, says the head doctor.
It's been rather emotional because this hospital has not seen the patient for 9 months, which is a very long time for us. We have never taken a break like that. We like renovating to keep everything nice and pretty, but we have never closed our doors. We just transferred patients to other premises.
More than $546,000 from the regional and reserve budget of Ukraine were allocated for the repairs and purchase of equipment for Balakliia Hospital. Since the start of Russia's large-scale invasion of Ukraine, some 300 medical facilities in the Kharkiv region, from rural outpatient clinics to regional hospitals, have been in desperate need of repair or reconstruction.
That's all for today. Thank you for watching Eastern Europe Review. We will be back next week with the news stories. I'm Alexandra Shapalina. Keep watching TVP World and see you next time.